So today I'm going to share with you the exact blueprint I used to finally get off the tools to scale my business and have the freedom to breathe. Now, if you don't know me, my name's Wilkes and I'm a construction business coach, but I didn't start out like that. I started out just like you, with my steel toe cap boots on, my high-vis jacket, my dirty cement-covered jeans, and I was doing everything myself in my business. And I really had a belief when I was younger, the harder I worked physically, the more successful I'd be. But the truth was, the harder I worked, the more trapped I actually felt in my business. And the real turning point was when I stopped thinking like a tradesperson or a craftsman and really started thinking like an entrepreneur, like a business leader. And once I made that shift from tradesperson to entrepreneur, everything changed in my business. So in this video, I'm going to give you what I call the entrepreneur's blueprint. How do we make that jump from working in your business physically with your own two hands to actually building a business that runs without you? Now, you might be thinking, well, look, Greg, I can't just walk off site. My clients expect me to be there. They're paying for me. My lads need me on site. You know, everything grinds to a halt if I'm not there. And I used to think exactly the same as that. But the reality is, if you're putting in every screw, if you're doing every quote, if every client call relies on you, then what you've done is you've actually made yourself a bottleneck in the business. And we know there's only 24 hours in the day. So what that's going to mean is if you're doing everything yourself, your growth is going to be capped. Now, I remember working those long days. I was doing those 10, 12, 14-hour days, and I felt like I was drowning, even though I was doing all the work. It was a struggle, and maybe that sounds familiar to you. But what you'll realize is if you're continuing to do this hands-on approach, it will create a ceiling in your business, and you can actually feel yourself hitting this ceiling, because you'll notice it when no matter how many hours you're working, you can't seem to push past a certain level of turnover. Maybe you've noticed that for 1, 2, 3 years in a row, you're just not really growing with your turnover. Or maybe every weekend is swallowed up because you're catching up on your admin tasks. You also know when you've hit a ceiling when your clients are starting to get frustrated because they're waiting for you to get back with them. Or maybe your staff, your other trades that you've got, they're stalled. They can't move forward because they're always waiting for your say-so and your approval. Now, it's really dangerous to be in that area. If you're starting to notice those signs, what's going to happen is burnout is going to creep in. Mistakes are going to start slipping through, and opportunities you're going to miss because you're so busy you can't focus on them. So instead of you being the foundation and the pillar of growth, your own effort actually becomes the cap. You become the cap that stops the business moving forward. And you end up building a bit of a prison for yourself. It's not a nice place to be in. And the longer you stay in that mindset and stay in that area, it really is much harder to escape. So we really want to shift away from that, and we've got to have a mindset shift. And we've got to think about what is it that's got to change. It's not just the work that you do every day. The first change actually starts with you. So you've got to shift from being that master craftsman to being the master strategist. And sometimes we don't think of ourselves like that, but you've got to be able to think that my job is not just about laying bricks or screwing pieces of timber together. Your job actually becomes, how do I build a business? How do I deliver my business at the highest standard without me being there? And that's a really significant shift that has to happen. And when you get that, when it finally clicks, it becomes quite powerful, because you realize your value isn't in swinging a hammer anymore. Your value is actually about, how do I create systems? How do I build teams? How do I steer this ship? Because that's how you'll create the most value for people around you that are relying on you. And it really does matter. It's important to create this shift, because your family, they're not impressed by how many emergencies you fixed in the day. They're counting on you for stability for tomorrow. They want you to build them a future. When you systemize, when you hire, when you train, what you're actually doing is you're actually protecting your family. You're protecting paying their school fees. You're protecting paying your mortgage. You're protecting their future holidays and evenings around the table. Now, your kids aren't going to remember how many emergencies you fixed, but they will remember that you used to make it home for dinner every night. And your employees too, they're relying on you to make this shift, because they want a plan for their life too. You know, when you're leading with clear processes and you've got predictable projects coming in all the time, then what you're doing is you're creating secure work for your employees for the next few years. And they notice that. You know, if you've got apprentices, they notice that you've got a pathway going forward. Your supervisors, they notice what good looks like, and your team will stay. They'll stay with you because they see that the business isn't chaotic, but you're actually building something for the future, not just for your future, but for their future too. Now, let's just be really clear about this shift. It doesn't mean that you're now really lazy or that you're sitting at home not doing anything anymore on the sofa. What it just means is that this shift makes you move into a role where your leadership has got more impact than your labor on site ever could. And that's what we're trying to achieve here. So how do we do it? There's 3 big ways that you can make this shift, and I want to make this really practical for you. The first way is that you've got to systemize everything in your business. You've got to start documenting, how do you do things in your business? How do you quote? How do you deal with client communication? How do you deal with your sites? How are they set up the right way? How do you hand over projects at the end? All of that has to be turned into a clear process that anyone in the business can follow. Because when you systemize, then what happens is your quality becomes repeatable. So when you bring someone new on board, they don't have to learn everything the hard way. They've got a clear playbook that keeps your standards really high. And that's so important, because if it's chaotic in your business, that gets expensive. You'll lose money. Without systems, you'll be repeating the same task, but then doing them a different way every single time. So projects will take longer than they should, and you will make errors because you're constantly changing things up. Whereas when you have systems, you cut the waste, you save time, and you give everybody a consistent experience that builds and builds on your reputation. So as we said, we've already said some practical ways, but think about creating checklists for your site setups. Think about creating standard templates for your emails and for your quoting. And think about documenting your processes so that nothing slips through the cracks. And when everything lives inside a process instead of just in your own head, then your business stops depending on your memory and starts depending on the method and the system itself. And that's what's going to stop you firefighting every day. And what we really want you doing is running a machine that produces predictable results, because you have clear systems and processes in place. So that's number one. You've got to get the right systems in place as a priority. The second thing that you want to be able to do is delegate with confidence. Now, this is sometimes a tough one, because when you've built a business yourself, it's your baby. Most builders hate letting go of tasks because you think, well, no one's going to do it quite as good as me. But delegation isn't about just throwing someone some responsibility and throwing someone the keys and hoping for the best outcome. It's about delegating and training properly, handing over responsibility, and then trusting them to deliver. What often happens with business owners, and this is a big mistake they make, is they think they've delegated when all they've really done is just dumped a task on someone without any support at all, and then they can't quite work out why they've not got it right. That's not delegation, that's abdication. Now, proper delegation means you show someone, how is this task done? You then give them the tools to be able to do that task efficiently, and then you check in at the right times. Rather than micromanaging them, you set expectations, and then you step back and let them own that tasks, and then give them some credit for getting it done. It might not be exactly the way you want it done, but give them the dignity to be able to do it and see how they perform. Now, at first, that task is probably going to take longer than it would have taken you, and you'll think, well, I could have just done this quicker myself and saved myself some money. But if you keep allowing them to do that, then what you're going to do is you're going to buy back your time. Forevermore, you're never going to have to do that task again. And you've got to accept mistakes. They are going to make mistakes, and they're not going to be perfect. So don't expect perfection from your team, but just really create an environment where they can learn, where errors are corrected and noticed quickly and fixed, but where they're going to grow in confidence too. So they're not afraid to make mistakes, but they can fix those errors nice and easily if they do. Also, with delegation, we've got to set the right tasks at the right time. So start small, hand over first of all your admin and maybe ordering materials or things like that. Then you might move up to, how do I delegate my quoting? How do I delegate my site management or client communication? Every handover is a step toward freeing you up, but start small on it so that the small tasks don't matter necessarily if they get them wrong, and then gradually you're going to move yourself out of each role in your business. And when you do this, when you start delegating properly, you'll stop being the firefighter in your business, and it's a beautiful place for the business to be in. And the real test is, if you've got this right, is if you can go on holiday for a week and your business is still running because everyone knows what to do without you. That's when you've cracked it, and your team will respect you more for trusting them to step up on their own. The third thing you need to master is learning how to lead rather than laboring. And again, this is the final stage that a lot feel resistance to, because your main role in the business now is not to be the hardest worker, not to be the grafter, it's to be the leader in the business. And as we said, your hammer's not the most valuable tool anymore. Your vision for the business is the most powerful tool. So leading looks like when you're setting the direction of the company, you're making sure your team know exactly what the goals are of the business. What are we going to achieve this year? And then you'll hold them accountable for achieving those tasks if they're responsible for that. You're going to be looking for opportunities in the market. You're going to build relationships that win yourself bigger contracts, and you're going to focus on the culture of your company so that people actually want to work with you and stay with you and perform at their best. A good team is absolutely critical, and if you get the right culture, then you're going to have a great team to take your business forward. You've also got to become the coach for your own team. So rather than swooping in and fixing every problem, you teach your supervisors and your staff how to solve their own problems. So rather than them coming to you with every single issue, they learn how to fix things themselves and have pride that they're able to make decisions and move forward without your every input. And your leadership too really needs to focus on the profitability of the business. You've got to look ahead to cash flow, to your profit margins, to your marketing strategy, to your growth. When you're a craftsman and a laborer, you're only looking at the job in front of you and you're just thinking about, how do I keep the lights on? What we're really doing as a leader is you're building something that's profitable and that will last. And sometimes you're going to feel a challenge with this. When you turn up to site and they're desperate for a hand for you to do something and you've got to resist because you think, nope, sorry, guys, I've got to get back to the office because I need to win this £500,000 contract. It can be challenging at first, but that's the mindset you've got to get into, because you've got to remember that you're putting first your family, you're putting first your staff, and you're putting first your clients when you start making decisions like that, rather than picking up the hammer and getting on site to do something that really isn't that important. So they're the three things that you need to be doing. That's the blueprint from how you turn from a craftsman to an entrepreneur in your business. And what we're really creating here, it's not just about creating bigger turnover for your company, it's about creating freedom for you. And freedom to choose the kind of projects you want to work on, freedom to actually take some time off, go on holiday without panicking that your business is going to fall apart, and freedom for you to go home for dinner on time and not collapsing into bed absolutely exhausted. We want you to have time to feel like you're enjoying your business rather than being chained to it. And one of the biggest benefits is financially. A business that runs without you is worth way more if you ever wanted to sell it. No one wants to buy a company that only survives if you as the business owner are chained to it. But when you've got a systemized, scalable business, that is a serious asset for the future. So that's the entrepreneur's blueprint in a nutshell. Systemize your business, delegate with confidence, and step up and lead your team. If you do those things, you'll break away from being on the tools, you'll scale your business, and you'll actually create a life that you went into business for in the first place. So if that hit home for you, feel free to check out my other videos on how to scale a successful construction business.